Question 1. The audit findings indicate that a new AI-powered feature, designed to personalize user experiences by analyzing extensive user interaction data, has been developed and is nearing deployment without a formal data privacy, impact assessment, or explicit user consent mechanisms for the specific data processing involved. The engineering team is eager to launch the feature to gain a competitive advantage. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Halt the deployment of the AI feature immediately and initiate a comprehensive data privacy impact assessment, engaging legal and compliance teams to ensure adherence to all relevant data protection regulations and ethical guidelines before proceeding. Option B. Expedite the development process by focusing solely on the technical functionality of the AI feature, deferring any detailed privacy reviews until after the initial market release. Option C. Proceed with the launch of the AI feature as planned, with a commitment to address any potential data privacy concerns retrospectively after gathering initial user feedback. Option D. Deploy the AI feature with a general privacy notice that broadly covers data usage, assuming that user engagement implies consent for the new data processing activities. The correct answer is A. Halt the deployment of the AI feature immediately and initiate a comprehensive data privacy impact assessment, engaging legal and compliance teams to ensure adherence to all relevant data protection regulations and ethical guidelines before proceeding. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to innovate and the imperative to comply with established regulatory frameworks. The audit findings highlight a potential gap in the company's internal controls and data handling practices, which could expose the organization to significant legal and reputational risks. Navigating this requires a careful balance of business objectives and regulatory adherence, demanding a nuanced understanding of data privacy principles and their practical application. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, risk-based assessment aligned with the principles of data protection and responsible AI development. This involves engaging relevant stakeholders, including legal and compliance teams, to ensure that any proposed AI solution is designed and implemented in a manner that respects user privacy, minimizes bias, and adheres to all applicable data protection laws. This proactive and comprehensive review process is crucial for mitigating potential harm and ensuring long-term sustainability and trust. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid deployment without adequate privacy safeguards would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Specifically, it could violate data protection regulations by processing personal data without a lawful basis, failing to obtain necessary consents, or not implementing appropriate security measures to prevent data breaches. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for user privacy and could lead to discriminatory outcomes if the AI model is not properly vetted for bias. Another incorrect approach that involves circumventing established review processes to expedite development, even with the intention of addressing compliance later, is also professionally unacceptable. This bypasses critical risk assessment and validation steps, increasing the likelihood of non-compliance and potential harm. It signals a culture that prioritizes speed over responsibility, which is a direct contravention of ethical professional conduct and regulatory expectations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly identify the regulatory requirements and ethical considerations relevant to the project. Second, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, considering potential impacts on data privacy, security, and fairness. Third, engage cross-functional teams, including legal, compliance, engineering, and product management, to ensure all perspectives are considered. Fourth, develop and implement robust controls and safeguards throughout the development lifecycle. Finally, establish a continuous monitoring and review process to adapt to evolving regulations and best practices. Question 2. Which approach would be most effective for optimizing a core search algorithm process while ensuring user trust and regulatory compliance? Option A. Introduce algorithm changes based on competitor analysis without extensive internal testing or user impact assessment. Option B. Rely on internal team consensus and anecdotal feedback to guide algorithm adjustments for immediate efficiency gains. Option C. Rapidly deploy the most promising algorithm modification identified by the engineering team to gain a competitive edge. Option D. Implement a phased rollout of algorithm changes based on a/B testing and rigorous performance monitoring, with pre-implementation reviews by legal and privacy teams. Correct answer is D. Implement a phased rollout of algorithm changes based on a/B testing and rigorous performance monitoring, with pre-implementation reviews by legal and privacy teams. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficiency and innovation with the imperative to maintain data integrity and user trust. Google, as a global technology leader, operates under a complex web of regulations and ethical considerations related to data privacy, algorithmic fairness, and service reliability. Process optimization, while crucial for competitive advantage, must be implemented in a manner that does not inadvertently compromise these fundamental principles. Careful judgment is required to ensure that improvements do not lead to unintended negative consequences for users, or violate any applicable laws or internal policies. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, data-driven, and user-centric methodology. This involves thorough analysis, controlled experimentation, and robust validation before widespread implementation. Such an approach aligns with principles of responsible innovation, ensuring that any process changes are well understood, their impact is measurable, and potential risks are mitigated. This proactive stance is essential for maintaining compliance with data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR, CCPA. Though specific jurisdiction is not provided, the principles are universal for a global tech company, and upholding ethical standards by ensuring fairness and transparency in algorithmic processes. It also fosters a culture of continuous improvement that is grounded in evidence and user feedback, rather than speculative changes. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid implementation without adequate testing or validation would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the introduction of biases in algorithms, degradation of service performance, or breaches of user privacy, all of which carry significant regulatory and reputational risks. For instance, deploying an unvalidated optimization could inadvertently violate principles of algorithmic fairness if it disproportionately affects certain user groups, leading to potential discrimination claims and regulatory scrutiny. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or internal gut feelings, rather than empirical data, would fail to provide the necessary justification for changes and could result in inefficient or even harmful modifications. This lacks the rigor expected in a data-driven organization and could lead to misallocation of resources and unintended negative outcomes. A third incorrect approach that bypasses established review processes, such as legal or privacy reviews, would be a direct violation of internal governance and potentially external regulations, exposing the company to significant legal liabilities and ethical breaches. Professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem and the desired outcome of the optimization. Second, identify all potential impacts, including technical, user experience, legal, and ethical considerations. Third, develop multiple potential solutions, each with a clear hypothesis about its expected impact. Fourth, design and execute controlled experiments to test these hypotheses, collecting relevant data. Fifth, analyze the results rigorously, comparing them against predefined success metrics and risk thresholds. Sixth, conduct thorough reviews with relevant stakeholders, including legal, privacy, and engineering teams. Finally, implement the validated solution incrementally, with continuous monitoring and feedback loops to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance. Question 3. The review process indicates that a new AI-powered feature designed to personalize user content feeds has been developed with significant speed. However, concerns have been raised regarding potential algorithmic bias and the transparency of data usage. Which of the following approaches best aligns with ethical and regulatory best practices for handling such a situation? Option A. Prioritize the feature's launch and address ethical concerns only if they are explicitly raised by a significant number of users or regulatory bodies. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive, independent ethical audit of the algorithm and data handling practices before any public release, involving legal, ethics, and engineering teams. Option C. Rely on existing, general data privacy policies to govern the new feature, assuming they adequately cover the specific data usage involved. Option D. Immediately deploy the feature to gather real-world data and address any identified ethical issues through post-launch updates. Correct answer is D. Immediately deploy the feature to gather real-world data and address any identified ethical issues through post-launch updates. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for rapid innovation and product deployment with the imperative to adhere to established ethical guidelines and regulatory expectations, particularly concerning user data privacy and algorithmic fairness. The pressure to deliver cutting-edge features can sometimes lead to overlooking potential biases or unintended consequences, necessitating a robust and proactive approach to ethical review. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it integrates ethical considerations and regulatory compliance into the product development lifecycle from the outset. This proactive stance, involving cross-functional teams and iterative review, ensures that potential ethical and regulatory risks are identified and mitigated early, aligning with principles of responsible innovation and data stewardship. It demonstrates a commitment to user trust and adherence to evolving legal frameworks governing AI and data usage. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach fails by prioritizing speed of deployment over thorough ethical vetting. This can lead to the release of products that inadvertently perpetuate societal biases or violate user privacy expectations, creating significant reputational and legal risks. Such an approach disregards the ethical obligation to protect users and the regulatory requirement for due diligence in data handling and algorithmic design. Another incorrect approach is to delegate ethical review solely to a specialized team without embedding it within the core development process. This creates a bottleneck and can result in a disconnect between the technical implementation and the ethical guidelines, leading to superficial reviews or a lack of understanding of the practical implications of the technology. It fails to foster a culture of ethical responsibility across the entire organization. A third incorrect approach involves relying on post-launch feedback to identify and address ethical issues. While user feedback is valuable, waiting until a product is live to discover ethical problems is reactive and can result in significant harm to users and substantial remediation costs. This approach neglects the proactive duty to anticipate and prevent harm, which is a cornerstone of ethical product development and regulatory compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that emphasizes proactive risk assessment, continuous ethical dialogue, and cross-functional collaboration. This involves establishing clear ethical principles, integrating them into design and development workflows, conducting regular impact assessments, and fostering a culture where ethical concerns can be raised and addressed without fear of reprisal. Decision-making should be guided by a commitment to user well-being, fairness, transparency, and compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. Question 4. The analysis reveals that a new AI-powered content personalization feature is being developed for a popular Alphabet Google service. This feature aims to dynamically adjust content displayed to users based on their inferred interests and past interactions. What is the most comprehensive and ethically sound approach to assessing the potential impact of this feature before its public release? Option A. Form a basic technical review to ensure the feature functions as intended, with a cursory check for any obvious data leaks, and assume that any regulatory concerns will be addressed by the legal department on an as-needed basis. Option B. Rely on existing, general data privacy policies and assume that the new feature will operate within those established parameters without requiring a specific impact assessment. Option C. Prioritize the feature's performance metrics and user engagement statistics, deferring any detailed impact assessment until after the feature has been launched and user feedback is gathered. Option D. Conduct a thorough privacy and data security impact assessment, including a review of data collection, usage, and retention policies, and evaluate potential compliance with relevant global data protection regulations like GDPR and CCPA, while also considering the ethical implications of algorithmic bias and user manipulation. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough privacy and data security impact assessment, including a review of data collection, usage, and retention policies, and evaluate potential compliance with relevant global data protection regulations like GDPR and CCPA, while also considering the ethical implications of algorithmic bias and user manipulation. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a new feature in a widely used online service, developed by Alphabet Google, has the potential to significantly alter user data collection practices. The challenge lies in anticipating and evaluating the downstream impacts of this change on user privacy, data security, and compliance with relevant regulations, particularly within the context of Alphabet's global operations and the diverse legal landscapes it navigates. This requires a proactive and comprehensive impact assessment that goes beyond immediate functional testing. The correct approach involves a multifaceted impact assessment that systematically identifies potential risks and benefits across various domains. This includes a thorough review of how the new feature interacts with existing data handling policies, how it might affect user consent mechanisms, and its implications for data minimization principles. It also necessitates an evaluation of potential compliance gaps with regulations such as the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, in Europe, the CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, in the United States, and other applicable privacy laws globally. This approach aligns with best practices in responsible technology development, emphasizing user trust, data protection by design, and adherence to legal obligations. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the technical functionality of the new feature, without considering its broader implications. For instance, assuming that existing data protection measures are sufficient without a specific review for the new feature's context is a regulatory failure. This overlooks the principle of privacy by design and privacy by default, which mandates that data protection considerations are integrated into the design of systems and services from the outset. Another incorrect approach is to defer the impact assessment to a later stage, after the feature has been launched, which poses significant ethical and legal risks. This can lead to retrospective remediation efforts, potential data breaches, and non-compliance penalties, undermining user trust and Alphabet's commitment to responsible data stewardship. A further failure would be to conduct a superficial assessment that only considers the most obvious data privacy concerns, neglecting less apparent but equally critical impacts on data security or algorithmic bias. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the project's objectives and the potential data flows involved. This should be followed by a comprehensive risk identification phase, where potential impacts on privacy, security, and compliance are brainstormed. Mitigation strategies should then be developed for identified risks, and these strategies should be integrated into the development lifecycle. Continuous monitoring and reassessment are crucial, especially as regulations evolve and user behavior changes. This iterative process ensures that impact assessments remain relevant and effective throughout the product lifecycle. Question 5. Process analysis reveals that a new feature designed to enhance user engagement by personalizing content recommendations is ready for deployment. This feature will process user interaction data to generate tailored suggestions. Given the strict regulatory framework governing data privacy and accuracy, what is the most prudent approach to implementing this feature to mitigate potential compliance risks and ensure data integrity? Option A. Implement a phased rollout, starting with a small percentage of users, accompanied by comprehensive real-time monitoring of data processing and user interactions, with a predefined rollback plan in place. Option B. Conduct an exhaustive, multi-month internal testing cycle that simulates every conceivable data scenario before any external release, even if it significantly delays the launch. Option C. Release the feature to all users and rely solely on user bug reports to identify any data integrity or privacy concerns. Option D. Deploy the feature to all users immediately to maximize user engagement benefits, assuming existing data handling protocols are sufficient. Correct answer is A. Implement a phased rollout, starting with a small percentage of users, accompanied by comprehensive real-time monitoring of data processing and user interactions, with a predefined rollback plan in place. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in a regulated environment, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new features with the imperative to maintain compliance and data integrity. The challenge lies in the potential for unintended consequences of a new feature on existing data handling processes, which could lead to regulatory breaches or operational disruptions. The pressure to innovate and deliver quickly can create tension with the meticulous processes required for regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the pursuit of innovation does not compromise established compliance frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout with robust monitoring and rollback capabilities. This strategy aligns with best practices in software development and regulatory compliance. By deploying to a small subset of users first, the team can observe the feature's impact in a controlled environment. This allows for the early detection of any data handling anomalies or compliance deviations without affecting the entire user base. The inclusion of comprehensive monitoring tools provides real-time insights into data flow and system behavior, enabling prompt identification of issues. The predefined rollback plan ensures that if significant problems arise, the system can be quickly reverted to a stable state, minimizing potential regulatory exposure and user impact. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible innovation, prioritizing both functionality and adherence to established regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data privacy and accuracy. Incorrect approaches analysis. A full, immediate rollout without prior testing or monitoring is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for potential data integrity issues and a lack of due diligence in ensuring compliance with data handling regulations. This approach exposes the organization to a high risk of widespread data corruption or privacy violations, which could result in severe penalties, reputational damage, and loss of user trust. Deploying the feature only after extensive, lengthy internal testing that delays its release significantly, without any mechanism for iterative feedback or phased deployment, represents a failure to balance innovation with market needs. While thorough testing is crucial, an overly rigid process that stifles timely delivery can lead to competitive disadvantage and missed opportunities. Furthermore, if the testing itself does not adequately simulate real-world data variations or user interactions, it might still miss critical issues, making the long delay unproductive. This approach can also be seen as inefficient resource allocation. Implementing the feature without any specific monitoring for data integrity or compliance metrics, relying solely on user feedback to identify problems, is also a regulatory and ethical lapse. User feedback is often reactive and may not capture subtle data anomalies or systemic compliance issues. This approach places an undue burden on users to identify problems that the development and compliance teams should proactively address. It signifies a reactive rather than a proactive stance on compliance, which is often insufficient in regulated industries. Professional reasoning. Professionals in regulated environments must adopt a risk-based approach to implementation. This involves identifying potential risks associated with new features, particularly concerning data handling and regulatory compliance. A structured decision-making process should include 1. Thorough risk assessment, 2. Development of mitigation strategies, e.g., phased rollout, enhanced monitoring, 3. Clear communication with all stakeholders, including compliance and legal teams, and 4. Establishment of clear go/no-go criteria for each stage of deployment. The goal is to achieve a balance between delivering value to users and upholding regulatory obligations and ethical standards. Question 6. What factors determine the most responsible approach to launching a new AI-powered feature that has the potential for significant user engagement, but also raises novel privacy concerns? Option A. Prioritizing rapid deployment to capture market share and iterating on privacy and security measures based on initial user adoption and competitive pressures. Option B. A comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes user privacy and data protection throughout the feature development lifecycle, incorporating privacy-by-design principles and robust safeguards. Option C. Focusing primarily on the technical innovation and potential user engagement metrics, with privacy and security considerations addressed only if significant user complaints arise. Option D. Launching the feature with a prominent disclaimer and relying on user feedback and incident reports to identify and address privacy issues post-deployment. Correct answer is B. A comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes user privacy and data protection throughout the feature development lifecycle, incorporating privacy-by-design principles and robust safeguards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing innovation with user privacy and data security, particularly within the context of a rapidly evolving technology landscape. The core difficulty lies in anticipating potential misuse of a new feature and proactively mitigating risks without stifling beneficial development. Google's commitment to user trust and adherence to data protection regulations necessitates a rigorous evaluation process that goes beyond mere technical feasibility. The challenge is to identify and address potential privacy implications before they manifest as actual harm or regulatory noncompliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multidisciplinary risk assessment that prioritizes user privacy and data protection throughout the feature development lifecycle. This aligns with best practices in responsible AI development and data governance, emphasizing a proactive, privacy-by-design philosophy. Specifically, it requires identifying potential data collection, usage, and sharing scenarios, assessing the sensitivity of the data involved, and implementing robust safeguards such as anonymization, differential privacy, and granular user controls. This approach is ethically sound as it respects user autonomy and minimizes potential harm. From a regulatory standpoint, it directly addresses the principles embedded in data protection frameworks that mandate data minimization, purpose limitation, and security by design. Incorrect approaches analysis. Launching the feature with a disclaimer and relying solely on user reporting for issues represents a reactive and insufficient approach. This fails to meet the ethical obligation to protect users from foreseeable harm and violates the spirit, if not the letter, of data protection regulations that require proactive risk mitigation. Such a strategy places an undue burden on users to identify and report problems, which is not a substitute for diligent internal assessment. Prioritizing rapid deployment and market share over thorough privacy and security vetting is a direct contravention of responsible innovation principles. This approach risks significant reputational damage, regulatory penalties, and erosion of user trust. It demonstrates a disregard for the potential negative consequences of unchecked technological advancement and prioritizes business objectives above fundamental user rights and legal obligations. Focusing exclusively on the technical novelty and potential user engagement metrics without a commensurate evaluation of privacy implications is a critical oversight. While innovation and engagement are important, they cannot come at the expense of fundamental privacy rights. This narrow focus ignores the broader societal impact and regulatory landscape, leading to potential compliance failures and ethical breaches. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that integrates ethical considerations and regulatory compliance into every stage of product development. This involves establishing clear data governance policies, conducting thorough privacy impact assessments, engaging legal and privacy experts early in the process, and fostering a culture of responsible innovation. When faced with novel features, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying all potential data flows and user interactions. 2. Assessing the sensitivity and privacy implications of each interaction. 3. Evaluating existing and potential regulatory requirements. 4. Designing and implementing robust technical and procedural safeguards. 5. Conducting ongoing monitoring and iterative improvement. This systematic approach ensures that innovation is pursued responsibly, safeguarding user trust and adhering to legal and ethical standards. Question 7. During the evaluation of a new AI-powered content summarization feature for a widely used search product, the engineering team proposes a novel approach that leverages real-time user interaction data to personalize summaries. While this could significantly enhance user experience by providing more relevant information, there's a concern that the dynamic nature of the personalization might inadvertently lead to the generation of biased or misleading summaries, potentially violating principles of fair information practice and accuracy in information delivery. The product manager is eager to launch the feature quickly to gain a competitive edge. What is the most appropriate course of action for the product manager and engineering lead? Option A. Proceed with the launch of the feature as planned, relying on user feedback and post-launch monitoring to identify and address any potential issues with bias or accuracy. Option B. Implement the feature with a simplified, less personalized version of the algorithm to minimize immediate risks, deferring the more advanced personalization for a later update after further research. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive legal and ethical review of the personalization algorithm, including bias detection and mitigation strategies, and develop clear user-facing disclosures about the AI's personalization capabilities before proceeding with a phased rollout. Option D. Halt development of the personalization aspect of the feature entirely and focus on a static summarization approach to avoid any potential regulatory scrutiny. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive legal and ethical review of the personalization algorithm, including bias detection and mitigation strategies, and develop clear user-facing disclosures about the AI's personalization capabilities before proceeding with a phased rollout. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to innovate and the need to adhere to established regulatory frameworks designed to protect users and maintain market integrity. The core difficulty lies in balancing the potential benefits of a new feature against the risks of noncompliance, which could lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and user distrust. Careful judgment is required to assess these risks objectively and to ensure that any new development aligns with the spirit and letter of the law. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, proactive, and documented review process. This involves engaging legal and compliance teams early, conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that considers potential user impact and regulatory implications, and developing clear mitigation strategies. This methodical approach ensures that innovation is pursued responsibly, with a strong emphasis on user safety and adherence to Alphabet's, Google's, internal policies and external regulatory obligations. This aligns with the ethical imperative to act with integrity and to safeguard the company's stakeholders. An incorrect approach that involves launching the feature without adequate legal review would fail to uphold the company's duty of care to its users and would violate regulatory principles requiring due diligence in product development. This could expose the company to significant fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay the feature indefinitely due to perceived minor risks, would stifle innovation and potentially lead to a competitive disadvantage, failing to meet business objectives. A third incorrect approach, which is to implement the feature with only a superficial review and rely on post-launch fixes, demonstrates a disregard for regulatory compliance and user protection, creating a high risk of significant negative consequences. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with understanding the problem and its potential impact. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders, including legal, engineering, product management, and user experience teams. Next, they should gather information, including a detailed understanding of the proposed feature, its intended functionality, and potential user interactions. This should be followed by an analysis of risks and benefits, considering both technical and regulatory perspectives. Finally, professionals should develop and evaluate alternative solutions, selecting the option that best balances innovation with compliance and ethical considerations, ensuring that all decisions are well documented and justifiable. Question 8. Operational review demonstrates that a new AI-powered feature, designed to personalize user content recommendations, is nearing its launch deadline. While the engineering team has conducted initial technical testing, concerns have been raised about potential biases in the recommendation algorithm that could inadvertently favor certain types of content or users, leading to a less diverse and potentially unfair user experience. The product team is pushing for immediate launch to capitalize on market momentum. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure responsible development and deployment? Option A. Perform a quick review of the algorithm's code for obvious technical flaws, assuming that any subtle biases will not significantly impact the user experience or violate any regulations. Option B. Delegate the responsibility for bias assessment solely to the engineering team, trusting their technical expertise to identify and resolve any algorithmic fairness concerns. Option C. Conduct a thorough bias audit of the AI model, involving cross-functional teams including ethics and legal, to identify and mitigate potential fairness issues before launch, even if it means a slight delay. Option D. Proceed with the launch as planned, relying on post-launch user feedback and monitoring to identify and address any bias issues that may arise. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough bias audit of the AI model, involving cross-functional teams including ethics and legal, to identify and mitigate potential fairness issues before launch, even if it means a slight delay. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for rapid innovation with robust risk management. The pressure to launch new features quickly, a common dynamic in the tech industry, can lead to shortcuts in the risk assessment process. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that the inherent risks associated with AI-driven features are identified, understood, and mitigated effectively, without unduly stifling innovation. This requires a nuanced understanding of potential harms, the regulatory landscape, and the company's ethical obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive, multi-stage risk assessment integrated into the development lifecycle. This includes identifying potential biases in the AI model, assessing the impact of these biases on user experience and fairness, and developing mitigation strategies. This aligns with principles of responsible AI development, which are increasingly being codified in regulatory frameworks and industry best practices. For instance, guidelines from bodies like the NIST AI Risk Management Framework emphasize understanding AI system context, identifying potential harms, and implementing risk management strategies throughout the AI lifecycle. Ethically, this approach prioritizes user well-being and fairness, preventing discriminatory outcomes and maintaining user trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on post-launch monitoring to identify and address risks. This is a reactive strategy that fails to meet the proactive requirements of responsible AI development. Regulatory bodies and ethical guidelines emphasize the importance of anticipating and mitigating risks before deployment. Waiting for issues to arise can lead to significant harm to users, reputational damage, and potential regulatory penalties for failing to exercise due diligence. Another incorrect approach is to delegate the entire risk assessment to the engineering team without involving legal, ethics, or product management. While engineers are crucial for technical implementation, they may not have the broader perspective needed to assess the full spectrum of risks, including legal compliance, ethical implications, and user impact. This siloed approach can lead to blind spots and an incomplete understanding of potential harms, violating principles of comprehensive risk management and cross-functional accountability. A third incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial risk assessment that only considers obvious technical failures, ignoring subtle but potentially harmful issues like algorithmic bias or privacy concerns. This demonstrates a lack of depth in the risk assessment process and a failure to consider the multifaceted nature of AI risks. It neglects the ethical imperative to protect users from unintended consequences and may fall short of regulatory expectations for thorough risk evaluation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic and integrated approach to risk assessment for AI-driven features. This involves 1. Early identification, embedding risk assessment from the initial design phase. 2. Comprehensive scope, considering technical, ethical, legal, and user-centric risks. 3. Cross-functional collaboration, engaging diverse teams, engineering, legal, ethics, product, policy to ensure all perspectives are considered. 4. Iterative process, continuously reassessing risks as the AI model evolves and is deployed. 5. Documentation and transparency, maintaining clear records of risk assessments and mitigation plans. This framework ensures that innovation is pursued responsibly, aligning with both regulatory requirements and ethical obligations to users and society. Question 9. The assessment process reveals a candidate's approach to handling user data collected through a new feature designed to personalize user experience. The feature collects usage patterns, search queries, and location data. The candidate proposes to use this data for improving the feature's algorithms, for internal research into user behavior trends, and to share anonymized, aggregated data with select research partners for academic studies on digital engagement. The candidate also suggests retaining the data for an extended period to allow for future, as yet undefined analytical opportunities. Which of the following approaches best aligns with ethical data handling and regulatory compliance? Option A. Obtain consent for algorithm improvement and internal research. Share anonymized, aggregated data with research partners only if they agree to strict data usage agreements. Retain data for a moderate period but not indefinitely. Option B. Use the data for algorithm improvement and internal research without explicit consent, as it is implied by the use of the feature. Share anonymized, aggregated data with research partners without explicit consent. Retain data indefinitely for future analytical opportunities. Option C. Proceed with using the data for algorithm improvement and internal research, as this is standard practice for enhancing user experience. Share anonymized, aggregated data with research partners without explicit consent, assuming anonymization sufficiently protects privacy. Retain data indefinitely for future analytical opportunities. Option D. Obtain explicit, informed consent from users for each specific purpose of data usage, including algorithm improvement, internal research, and sharing with research partners. Implement clear data retention policies that align with the necessity of data for stated purposes, and ensure data is deleted when no longer required. Correct answer is D. Obtain explicit, informed consent from users for each specific purpose of data usage, including algorithm improvement, internal research, and sharing with research partners. Implement clear data retention policies that align with the necessity of data for stated purposes, and ensure data is deleted when no longer required. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a candidate's understanding of ethical considerations in data handling, a critical area for any technology company like Alphabet, Google. The professional challenge lies in balancing innovation and user privacy, especially when dealing with potentially sensitive information. A candidate must demonstrate an awareness of the legal and ethical boundaries governing data collection, storage, and usage, ensuring compliance with relevant regulations and maintaining user trust. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes user consent and transparency, aligning with principles of data minimization and purpose limitation. This approach ensures that data is collected and used only for explicitly stated purposes, with the user's informed agreement. This is fundamental to maintaining ethical data stewardship and adhering to data protection laws, which often mandate clear consent mechanisms and restrict data usage to the scope of that consent. An incorrect approach that involves using aggregated, anonymized data without explicit consent for secondary research purposes fails to uphold the principle of informed consent. While anonymization can reduce privacy risks, it does not negate the need for consent if the original data collection was for a different, specific purpose. This can lead to regulatory violations and erode user trust. Another incorrect approach, which involves sharing user data with third-party partners for marketing purposes without explicit opt-in consent, directly contravenes data protection regulations that require affirmative consent for such data sharing. This practice can result in significant legal penalties and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach, which involves retaining user data indefinitely for potential future, unspecified uses, violates the principle of data retention limitation. Regulations typically require data to be kept only as long as necessary for the purpose for which it was collected, and indefinite retention without a clear, justifiable purpose is a common regulatory and ethical failing. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, a clear understanding of applicable data protection laws, such as GDPR or CCPA, depending on the relevant jurisdiction, and a commitment to user-centric ethical principles. Always err on the side of caution by seeking explicit consent for any data use beyond the initial purpose, prioritizing transparency, and implementing robust data governance policies. Question 10. Regulatory review indicates that a new AI-powered feature designed to personalize user experiences is nearing its development deadline. The engineering team has identified a potential for the feature to inadvertently collect and process sensitive user data beyond what is strictly necessary for its core functionality. The product manager is under pressure to launch the feature on schedule. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with data privacy regulations and ethical data handling practices? Option A. Halt the launch immediately and indefinitely until a comprehensive, in-depth privacy impact assessment can be completed, even if it means missing the market window. Option B. Delay the launch to conduct a thorough privacy impact assessment, identify specific data processing risks, and implement necessary technical and policy safeguards to align the feature with data minimization and purpose limitation principles before release. Option C. Conduct a rapid, high-level review of existing privacy policies to confirm general compliance, and then proceed with the launch, relying on the assumption that the feature's intent is beneficial. Option D. Proceed with the launch as planned, assuming that any minor data collection issues can be addressed in a subsequent update after user feedback is gathered. Correct answer is D. Proceed with the launch as planned, assuming that any minor data collection issues can be addressed in a subsequent update after user feedback is gathered. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid product development and ensuring compliance with evolving data privacy regulations. The need to innovate quickly, a hallmark of the tech industry, must be balanced against the imperative to protect user data and maintain trust. Careful judgment is required to navigate this complex landscape, ensuring that new features do not inadvertently create privacy risks or violate legal obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive and integrated compliance strategy. By embedding privacy considerations into the design and development lifecycle from the outset, the team minimizes the risk of costly retrofits or regulatory penalties. This aligns with the principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and privacy by design, which are foundational to robust data protection frameworks. Specifically, consulting with legal and privacy experts early ensures that the product adheres to relevant regulations, such as the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, or the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, depending on the target user base. By identifying potential data processing activities and implementing appropriate safeguards, an incorrect approach that focuses solely on launching the feature quickly without adequate privacy review fails to uphold professional responsibility and regulatory compliance. This could lead to violations of data privacy laws, resulting in significant fines, reputational damage, and loss of user trust. Such an approach demonstrates a disregard for user rights and a failure to implement adequate risk management. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying the launch indefinitely due to minor, addressable privacy concerns, is also professionally unsound. While caution is necessary, an inability to find a balanced solution that allows for innovation while mitigating risks can stifle progress and lead to missed market opportunities. This approach may indicate a lack of creative problem solving or an overly risk-averse culture that hinders effective product development. A third incorrect approach, which relies on a superficial review of privacy policies without understanding the practical implications for the new feature, is equally problematic. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to grasp the nuances of data processing. It creates a false sense of security, while leaving the company exposed to significant legal and ethical risks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential privacy risks associated with the new feature, evaluating the likelihood and impact of these risks, and developing mitigation strategies. Collaboration between product, engineering, legal, and privacy teams is crucial. When faced with novel privacy challenges, seeking expert advice and adopting a privacy-by-design methodology are essential steps to ensure both innovation and compliance. Question 11. Market research demonstrates that users are increasingly concerned about how their personal data is collected and utilized by online platforms. Alphabet Google, as a global technology provider, must navigate these concerns while continuing to offer personalized services. When implementing new features that involve the collection and processing of user data, what is the most ethically sound and legally compliant approach to obtaining user consent? Option A. Clearly state that data collection is necessary for service functionality and present users with a single, all-or-nothing consent option for all data processing activities related to the new feature. Option B. Rely on pre-checked boxes for data processing consent, assuming users agree to all terms by continuing to use the service, and provide a general privacy policy that users can access if they choose. Option C. Implement a clear and prominent notice explaining the data collection and processing activities, offering granular choices for users to opt in or opt out of specific data uses, and providing an easily accessible mechanism to withdraw consent at any time. Option D. Adopt a standardized global consent mechanism that broadly covers data processing, without specific granular options, and assume that compliance with the strictest jurisdiction's laws will suffice for all regions. The correct answer is C. Implement a clear and prominent notice explaining the data collection and processing activities, offering granular choices for users to opt in or opt out of specific data uses, and providing an easily accessible mechanism to withdraw consent at any time. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data privacy and user consent, particularly within the context of a global technology company like Alphabet Google. The core difficulty lies in navigating the complex and often differing regulatory landscapes concerning personal data collection and usage across various jurisdictions, while simultaneously ensuring a consistent and user-friendly experience for a global user base. Balancing the need for robust data protection with the desire to offer personalized services requires careful judgment and a deep understanding of applicable laws and ethical considerations. The potential for reputational damage and legal repercussions from noncompliance is significant. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes obtaining explicit, informed consent from users for data processing activities, aligning with the principles of data protection regulation, such as the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which is a key framework for Alphabet's global operations. This involves clearly explaining what data is being collected, why it is being collected, how it will be used, and who it will be shared with. Providing users with granular control over their data preferences and making it easy for them to withdraw consent at any time are crucial elements of best professional practice. This approach demonstrates a commitment to user privacy, builds trust, and ensures compliance with stringent data protection laws, thereby mitigating legal and ethical risks. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying on implied consent or pre-checked boxes for data processing. This fails to meet the standard of explicit consent required by many data protection regulations. Users may not be fully aware of the extent of data collection or how it will be used, leading to a violation of their privacy rights and potential legal penalties. Another incorrect approach is to adopt a one-size-fits-all consent mechanism that does not account for jurisdictional differences in data protection laws. While seemingly efficient, this can lead to noncompliance in regions with stricter requirements, exposing the company to legal challenges and fines. It also fails to respect the varying expectations of users regarding data privacy in different parts of the world. A third incorrect approach is to make the process of opting out of data collection or managing privacy settings overly complex or difficult to find. This undermines the principle of user control and can be seen as an attempt to obscure data usage, which is ethically questionable and may violate regulations that mandate clear and accessible privacy controls. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should adopt a risk-based approach, starting with a thorough understanding of the most stringent applicable data protection regulations, such as GDPR, CCPA, etc., and then designing systems and processes that meet or exceed these standards globally. This involves 1. Identifying all data processing activities and the types of personal data involved. 2. Determining the legal basis for each processing activity, prioritizing explicit consent where appropriate. 3. Developing clear, concise, and easily understandable privacy notices and consent requests. 4. Implementing robust mechanisms for users to grant, manage, and withdraw consent. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating privacy practices to align with evolving regulations and best practices. 6. Conducting data protection impact assessments (DPIA) for high-risk processing activities. 7. Ensuring cross-functional collaboration between legal, engineering, product, and marketing teams to embed privacy by design and by default. Question 12. Market research demonstrates a significant user demand for a new AI-powered personalization feature that analyzes user behavior to tailor content recommendations. However, the proposed implementation involves processing a broad range of user data, some of which may be sensitive. Before proceeding with development and deployment, what is the most responsible and compliant course of action? Option A. Proceed with rapid development to capture market share, assuming that any potential privacy concerns can be addressed through post-launch updates and user notifications. Option B. Delegate the decision-making solely to the engineering team, trusting their technical expertise to build a feature that is both functional and compliant without external oversight. Option C. Implement the feature with minimal data processing initially, relying on user opt-in for expanded data collection, and address any regulatory ambiguities as they arise. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive privacy impact assessment and consult with legal and compliance teams to ensure the feature aligns with all relevant data protection regulations and ethical guidelines before development begins. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive privacy impact assessment and consult with legal and compliance teams to ensure the feature aligns with all relevant data protection regulations and ethical guidelines before development begins. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between rapid innovation and the need for robust, ethical decision-making within a regulated environment. The pressure to launch a new feature quickly, driven by market research, must be balanced against potential unintended consequences and compliance requirements. Careful judgment is required to navigate this tension, ensuring that user privacy and data integrity are not compromised in the pursuit of market advantage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, multidisciplinary review before deployment. This aligns with principles of responsible innovation and data stewardship, which are increasingly emphasized in regulatory frameworks governing technology companies. Specifically, it demonstrates a commitment to proactive risk assessment and mitigation, ensuring that the feature's design and implementation adhere to established privacy by design principles and relevant data protection laws. This systematic evaluation minimizes the likelihood of regulatory breaches, reputational damage, and harm to users. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed and market demand, without adequate consideration for data privacy and security, would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such an approach could lead to violations of data protection laws, such as those requiring explicit user consent for data processing or mandating data minimization. Ethically, it would demonstrate a disregard for user trust and autonomy, potentially exposing users to privacy risks. Another incorrect approach that relies on superficial checks or assumes compliance without rigorous validation would also be professionally unacceptable. This could result in overlooking critical vulnerabilities or misinterpreting regulatory requirements, leading to inadvertent non-compliance and potential legal repercussions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that integrates ethical considerations and regulatory compliance into the product development lifecycle from the outset. This involves establishing clear internal guidelines for feature development, mandating cross-functional reviews involving legal, privacy, and engineering teams, and conducting thorough impact assessments before any new feature is released. When faced with competing priorities, the framework should guide decision-makers to err on the side of caution, ensuring that user rights and regulatory obligations are paramount. Question 13. Implementation of a new AI-powered personalized content recommendation engine requires a comprehensive review of its data processing activities to ensure compliance with data privacy regulations. Which of the following approaches best balances innovation with user data protection? Option A. Prioritize the speed of deployment and assume that existing privacy policies are sufficient to cover the new functionality. Option B. Rely solely on obtaining explicit user consent for all data collection and processing activities related to the recommendation engine. Option C. Launch the feature immediately and address any privacy concerns or complaints that arise from users after deployment. Option D. Conduct a thorough data protection impact assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks before the feature is deployed to users. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough data protection impact assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks before the feature is deployed to users. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid innovation and the need for robust data privacy safeguards, particularly within a technology company like Alphabet Google. The pressure to deploy new features quickly can sometimes lead to overlooking potential privacy implications, requiring careful judgment to balance user trust, regulatory compliance, and business objectives. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive, privacy-by-design methodology. This aligns with the principles of data protection regulations, which mandate that privacy considerations are integrated into the development lifecycle from the outset, rather than being an afterthought. By conducting a thorough data protection impact assessment (DPIA) before launch, the team demonstrates a commitment to identifying and mitigating privacy risks, ensuring that the new feature adheres to relevant laws and ethical standards, thereby safeguarding user data and maintaining trust. An incorrect approach that involves launching the feature and addressing privacy concerns post-launch would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This reactive stance violates the principle of data minimization and purpose limitation, as data might be collected or processed without a clear, predefined privacy justification. It also exposes the company to potential legal penalties for noncompliance with data protection laws, such as the GDPR or CCPA, which often require pre-assessment of risks. Furthermore, it erodes user trust, as individuals may feel their data is being handled carelessly. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on user consent without a comprehensive privacy assessment, is also professionally unacceptable. While consent is a crucial element of data processing, it is not a universal solution and does not absolve the company of its responsibility to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect data. Relying solely on consent can be problematic if the consent is not freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous, or if the underlying data processing activities themselves are inherently privacy invasive. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential privacy risks, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and determining appropriate mitigation strategies. Engaging with legal and privacy experts early in the development process is crucial. Furthermore, fostering a culture of privacy awareness within the engineering teams, where privacy is considered a core requirement, is essential for preventing such dilemmas. Question 14. Operational review demonstrates that a new AI-powered feature for personalized content recommendations is nearing its development completion. The engineering team believes the feature is technically sound and ready for deployment. However, there are concerns that the extensive user data required for personalization might inadvertently expose sensitive information or lead to biased outcomes. What is the most appropriate next step to ensure responsible product development and compliance? Option A. Prioritize the launch of the feature and schedule a high-level review of potential impacts in the subsequent quarter. Option B. Immediately deploy the feature to gather real-world user feedback and address any issues that arise post-launch. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy and bias impact assessment involving legal, privacy, and ethics experts before deployment. Option D. Rely on the engineering team's internal review to confirm that all data handling is compliant with existing privacy policies. Correct answer is B. Immediately deploy the feature to gather real-world user feedback and address any issues that arise post-launch. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid product development and the need for thorough impact assessment. The pressure to launch new features quickly can lead to shortcuts in evaluating potential negative consequences, including privacy risks, data security vulnerabilities, and compliance issues. A hasty approach risks not only regulatory penalties, but also significant reputational damage and user distrust. Careful judgment is required to balance innovation speed with responsible product stewardship. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and integrated impact assessment process. This involves identifying potential risks early in the development lifecycle, engaging relevant stakeholders, legal, privacy, security, engineering, and implementing mitigation strategies before launch. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations, such as those outlined in data protection frameworks, which mandate that privacy and security be considered by design and by default. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible innovation and adherence to legal and ethical obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves deferring the impact assessment until after the product has been launched. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of privacy by design and by default, which requires these considerations to be embedded from the outset. Post-launch assessments are reactive and often too late to prevent harm or address noncompliance effectively, potentially leading to breaches of data protection laws and user rights. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial assessment that only addresses obvious risks, ignoring potential downstream or indirect impacts. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adequately consider the broader implications of the product. Ethically, it is irresponsible as it prioritizes expediency over the protection of users and compliance with regulations that often require a comprehensive understanding of potential harms. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the engineering team to identify and mitigate all potential impacts without involving legal, privacy, or security experts. This is a critical failure because engineering teams may not possess the specialized knowledge required to interpret complex regulatory requirements or identify subtle privacy and security risks. It leads to an incomplete assessment and a higher likelihood of noncompliance and unintended negative consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, iterative approach to impact assessment. This involves establishing clear criteria for when an assessment is triggered, defining the scope and methodology, and ensuring that diverse expertise is brought to bear. Regular checkpoints throughout the development lifecycle are crucial for identifying and addressing emerging risks. When faced with pressure to accelerate timelines, professionals must advocate for the necessary time and resources for thorough impact assessment, framing it not as a roadblock, but as an essential component of responsible product development and risk management. Question 15. When evaluating the potential for using aggregated user interaction data to inform the development of new product features, what approach best balances user privacy, regulatory compliance, and business innovation? Option A. Obtain explicit, granular consent from users for the specific use of their data in developing new features, clearly outlining the purpose and scope of such usage. Option B. Postpone the development of data-informed features until absolute certainty regarding regulatory interpretations and technological safeguards is achieved, even if it means significant delays. Option C. Utilize aggregated and anonymized user data for feature development, assuming that the anonymization process sufficiently mitigates privacy risks and is implicitly covered by existing terms of service. Option D. Proceed with using user data for new feature development based on a broad interpretation of existing terms of service, believing that users have implicitly agreed to all potential future uses of their data. The correct answer is A. Obtain explicit, granular consent from users for the specific use of their data in developing new features, clearly outlining the purpose and scope of such usage. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to leverage user data for product improvement and the imperative to protect user privacy and comply with data protection regulations. The need for a nuanced approach that balances innovation with ethical responsibility and legal adherence is paramount. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and user control, aligning with the core principles of data protection regulations. By seeking explicit consent for data usage beyond the initial service provision, it upholds the user's right to privacy and autonomy. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of regulatory noncompliance, builds user trust, and fosters a sustainable data-driven product development strategy. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical data stewardship, which is increasingly crucial for long-term business success and brand reputation. An incorrect approach that involves using aggregated, anonymized data without explicit consent for new feature development, even if the anonymization process is robust, carries significant regulatory risk. While anonymization can reduce privacy concerns, regulations often define anonymized strictly, and re-identification risks, however small, can still lead to violations. Ethically, it bypasses the user's right to know how their data is being utilized for purposes beyond the original agreement. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with using the data for new features under the assumption that the terms of service implicitly grant broad usage rights, is professionally unacceptable. This interpretation often overreaches the scope of consent provided by users and can be challenged under consumer protection laws and data privacy frameworks. It demonstrates a disregard for the spirit of user agreements and a failure to proactively address evolving privacy expectations. A further incorrect approach, which is to delay or avoid implementing new features that could benefit from user data due to fear of regulatory scrutiny, stifles innovation and competitive advantage. While caution is necessary, a complete paralysis of data-informed development is not a sustainable or responsible professional strategy. It fails to explore legitimate and compliant methods of data utilization. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-stakeholder approach. This includes consulting with legal and compliance teams to understand the precise regulatory requirements, engaging with product and engineering teams to explore technical feasibility and data anonymization techniques, and considering user experience and ethical implications. A robust data governance framework, clear consent mechanisms, and ongoing privacy impact assessments are essential components of responsible data utilization. The focus should always be on achieving a balance that respects user rights while enabling responsible innovation. Question 16. Governance review demonstrates that a new AI-powered feature designed to personalize user experiences is nearing completion. The development team is eager to launch, but concerns have been raised internally regarding the feature's data processing activities and potential implications for user privacy under the Alphabet, Google, hiring assessment tests regulatory framework. What is the most appropriate next step to ensure responsible deployment? Option A. Initiate a broad, non-specific review of all company data handling policies to see if any general updates are needed, without focusing on the AI feature's specific data flows. Option B. Proceed with the launch of the AI feature, assuming that existing data handling policies are sufficient to cover the new functionality. Option C. Prioritize the feature's launch to gain a competitive advantage, with plans to address any potential data privacy issues that may arise after deployment. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, to evaluate the risks associated with the AI feature's data processing and identify necessary mitigation measures before launch. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, to evaluate the risks associated with the AI feature's data processing and identify necessary mitigation measures before launch. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge stemming from the inherent tension between a company's desire for rapid innovation and the imperative to maintain robust data privacy and security, especially when dealing with sensitive user information. The challenge lies in balancing the potential benefits of a new AI feature against the risks of non-compliance with data protection regulations, which can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of user trust. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests effectively. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough, risk-based assessment of the AI feature's data handling practices against the Alphabet, Google, hiring assessment tests specified regulatory framework. This involves identifying all personal data processed, understanding the purpose and legal basis for processing, evaluating the security measures in place, and ensuring compliance with principles like data minimization and purpose limitation. This proactive, compliance-first methodology aligns with the spirit and letter of data protection laws, demonstrating a commitment to responsible innovation and safeguarding user rights. It ensures that any new feature is developed and deployed with privacy by design and by default, minimizing the likelihood of regulatory breaches. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the AI feature's deployment without a comprehensive data privacy impact assessment. This failure to proactively identify and mitigate risks constitutes a direct violation of data protection principles that mandate such assessments for high-risk processing activities. It demonstrates a disregard for regulatory requirements and exposes the company to significant legal and ethical liabilities. Another incorrect approach is to assume that existing data handling policies are sufficient without a specific review for the new AI feature. AI systems often process data in novel ways or at a scale that may not be adequately covered by general policies. This assumption can lead to unintentional noncompliance, as the unique data flows and processing activities of the AI may fall outside the scope of current controls. It represents a failure in due diligence and risk management. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize speed to market over regulatory compliance, believing that any potential issues can be addressed post-launch. This is a fundamentally flawed strategy. Data protection regulations are designed to prevent harm before it occurs. Retroactive compliance is often more costly, less effective, and carries a higher risk of severe penalties. It signals a culture that undervalues data privacy and user trust. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to evaluating new technologies like AI. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the data being processed. 2. Conducting a thorough data protection impact assessment (DPIA) to identify and assess risks. 3. Implementing appropriate technical and organizational measures to mitigate identified risks. 4. Ensuring clear documentation of the assessment and mitigation strategies. 5. Seeking legal and privacy expert advice when necessary. This systematic process ensures that innovation is pursued responsibly and in full compliance with legal and ethical obligations. Question 17. Investigation of a critical security alert indicating a potential unauthorized access attempt on a production server What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for a system administrator? Option A. Immediately deploy a newly developed patch that is believed to address the vulnerability without further testing to prevent further intrusion. Option B. Initiate an immediate rollback of recent system changes and isolate the affected server from the network pending a full forensic analysis. Option C. Acknowledge the alert but continue with scheduled daily tasks, assuming it is a low-priority false positive. Option D. Forward the raw alert logs to a third-party security forum for expert analysis and community feedback. The correct answer is B. Initiate an immediate rollback of recent system changes and isolate the affected server from the network pending a full forensic analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to quickly address a potential security vulnerability and the need to maintain data integrity and comply with established protocols. The pressure to act swiftly can lead to shortcuts that bypass necessary checks and balances, potentially causing more harm than good. Careful judgment is required to balance urgency with due diligence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic and documented process for addressing security concerns. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that any changes made are thoroughly understood, tested, and approved, minimizing the risk of unintended consequences. It also supports regulatory compliance by providing an audit trail and demonstrating a commitment to responsible system management. This approach prioritizes a controlled and informed response over a reactive one, safeguarding both the system and the organization's reputation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately implementing a fix without proper testing or documentation. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it bypasses critical change management procedures designed to prevent system instability and data corruption. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for established security and operational protocols, potentially leading to a breach of compliance if the fix introduces new vulnerabilities or causes data loss. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the alert altogether, assuming it is a false positive. This is a severe ethical and professional failing. It demonstrates negligence and a disregard for potential security risks. Organizations have a duty to protect their systems and data, and ignoring a credible alert violates this duty, exposing the organization to significant security threats and potential regulatory penalties for failing to implement adequate security measures. A third incorrect approach is to share the raw alert data with external parties without proper authorization or anonymization. This constitutes a breach of data privacy and confidentiality regulations. It exposes sensitive system information and potentially user data to unauthorized individuals, creating significant security risks and violating trust. Professional practice dictates that sensitive information is handled with extreme care and according to strict data handling policies. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process when faced with security alerts. This process typically involves 1. Initial assessment and validation of the alert's credibility. 2. Consulting relevant documentation and established protocols for handling such alerts. 3. If validated, initiating a controlled change management process, including impact analysis, testing, and approval. 4. Implementing the approved solution with thorough documentation. 5. Post-implementation monitoring and verification. This framework ensures that actions are both effective and compliant, promoting a culture of responsible and secure operations. Question 18. What factors determine the prioritization of identified cybersecurity risks within Alphabet's operational framework, considering potential impacts on user data privacy and regulatory compliance? Option A. The technical complexity of exploiting a vulnerability and the number of similar incidents recorded in the past year. Option B. The visibility of the vulnerability in public security forums and the number of internal security engineers familiar with the technology. Option C. The potential impact on user data privacy, the likelihood of exploitation, and the severity of potential regulatory penalties. Option D. The cost of implementing mitigation measures and the perceived ease of patching the vulnerability. The correct answer is C. The potential impact on user data privacy, the likelihood of exploitation, and the severity of potential regulatory penalties. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment beyond simple identification. The challenge lies in prioritizing risks based on their potential impact and likelihood within the specific context of Alphabet's operations, which are subject to various regulatory frameworks governing data privacy, cybersecurity, and fair competition. A robust risk assessment must consider not only the technical vulnerabilities, but also the potential legal, reputational, and financial consequences of a security breach or non-compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it emphasizes a proactive and comprehensive evaluation of potential threats and their impact on Alphabet's services and users. This aligns with regulatory expectations for organizations handling vast amounts of data and operating in highly regulated sectors. Specifically, it reflects the principles of data protection by design and by default, as well as the need for ongoing risk management to maintain user trust and comply with evolving legal landscapes. This approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to mitigate the most significant risks, thereby safeguarding the company and its stakeholders. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate technical exploitability of a vulnerability fails to consider the broader business and regulatory implications. This could lead to underestimating the severity of a risk if the exploit is difficult but the potential impact, e.g., massive data breach leading to significant fines under GDPR or CCPA, is catastrophic. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes risks based on the frequency of past incidents, without considering the evolving threat landscape or the potential for novel, high-impact attacks, is also flawed. This reactive stance can leave the organization vulnerable to emerging threats. A third incorrect approach that solely considers the cost of mitigation without a thorough assessment of the potential impact of the risk is also professionally unacceptable. This can lead to underinvestment in critical security controls, exposing the organization to unacceptable levels of risk and potential regulatory penalties. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the organization's objectives and the regulatory environment. This involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing their likelihood and impact across various dimensions: technical, legal, financial, reputational, and then prioritizing mitigation efforts based on a comprehensive risk score. Regular review and adaptation of the risk assessment process are crucial to address the dynamic nature of threats and regulatory changes. Question 19. When evaluating a new feature that offers users enhanced control over their personal data through a novel interface, what is the most appropriate first step to ensure compliance with data privacy regulations? Option A. Proceed with the feature's development and deployment, assuming that increased user control inherently satisfies privacy regulations. Option B. Rely on user feedback alone to determine if the feature meets privacy expectations, without formal legal or regulatory scrutiny. Option C. Implement the feature with a disclaimer stating that users are responsible for understanding their privacy implications. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of applicable data privacy laws and consult with legal and compliance experts to assess the feature's alignment with regulatory principles and requirements. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of applicable data privacy laws and consult with legal and compliance experts to assess the feature's alignment with regulatory principles and requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing innovation with established ethical guidelines and regulatory compliance within the context of a rapidly evolving technological landscape. The core difficulty lies in determining whether a novel approach to data privacy, while potentially offering enhanced user control, adheres to the spirit and letter of existing regulations. The pressure to innovate and differentiate can create a temptation to interpret regulations loosely, requiring a rigorous and principled approach to ensure compliance and maintain user trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of existing data privacy regulations, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if the exam jurisdiction is the EU, or relevant U.S. federal and state laws if the jurisdiction is the U.S. This approach prioritizes understanding the fundamental principles of data protection, including lawful basis for processing, data minimization, purpose limitation, and transparency. It necessitates consulting with legal and compliance experts to interpret how the proposed innovative feature aligns with these principles and to identify any potential conflicts or areas requiring explicit clarification or amendment to existing policies. This ensures that user privacy is protected in a manner that is both legally sound and ethically responsible, fostering long-term trust and avoiding potential regulatory penalties. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the implementation based solely on the perceived user benefit without a comprehensive legal and ethical review. This fails to acknowledge the regulatory framework governing data privacy and could lead to violations of data protection laws, resulting in significant fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to rely on a superficial understanding of the regulations, assuming that the innovative nature of the feature automatically grants it compliance. This overlooks the detailed requirements and principles embedded within the laws, such as the need for explicit consent or the right to be forgotten, which may be impacted by the new feature. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize speed to market over thorough due diligence, making assumptions about compliance without seeking expert legal counsel. This demonstrates a disregard for regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities, potentially exposing the organization to significant legal and financial risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, starting with a clear understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape. When considering novel features or processes, a proactive engagement with legal and compliance teams is paramount. This involves documenting the assessment process, identifying potential risks, and developing mitigation strategies. If there is any ambiguity, seeking external legal advice is crucial. The decision-making process should be guided by the principle of privacy by design, ensuring that privacy considerations are integrated from the outset of development, rather than being an afterthought. Transparency with users about data handling practices, even with innovative features, is also a cornerstone of ethical practice. Question 20. System analysis indicates that a new feature designed to personalize user content based on inferred emotional states from their interactions is nearing completion. While engineering feasibility is confirmed and initial user engagement projections are high, preliminary internal discussions have raised concerns about potential misinterpretation of emotional states, leading to inappropriate content delivery, and the ethical implications of inferring and acting upon such sensitive data without explicit, granular consent for this specific inference. The product team is pushing for an expedited launch to capture market advantage. What is the most responsible and ethically sound approach to proceed? Option A. Deploy the feature to a limited beta group and rely solely on their feedback to identify and rectify any ethical issues before a wider release. Option B. Launch the feature immediately to capitalize on market opportunity and address any user complaints or ethical concerns that arise through post-launch updates and customer support. Option C. Prioritize user engagement metrics and proceed with the launch, assuming that user feedback will naturally guide any necessary adjustments to the emotional inference algorithms. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive ethical impact assessment involving legal, privacy, and ethics teams, alongside user research to understand potential harms and develop robust mitigation strategies before proceeding with a full launch. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive ethical impact assessment involving legal, privacy, and ethics teams, alongside user research to understand potential harms and develop robust mitigation strategies before proceeding with a full launch. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the inherent tension between rapid innovation and established ethical guidelines, particularly within a data-driven technology company like Google. The core difficulty lies in balancing the potential benefits of a new feature against the risks of unintended consequences and potential misuse of user data. The pressure to launch quickly, driven by competitive market forces, can create a temptation to overlook or downplay ethical considerations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that technological advancement does not come at the expense of user trust, privacy, and fairness. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive, multi-stakeholder review process that prioritizes ethical considerations and potential societal impact before full-scale deployment. This aligns with Google's stated commitment to responsible AI development and user privacy. By involving diverse teams, legal, privacy, ethics, product, engineering, and conducting thorough impact assessments, the company can identify and mitigate risks early. This approach demonstrates a commitment to ethical principles, regulatory compliance, even if not explicitly stated in a specific U.S. regulation for this hypothetical. The underlying principles of data protection and consumer trust are paramount, and building sustainable user relationships. It reflects a mature decision-making framework that prioritizes long-term integrity over short-term gains. Incorrect approach is analysis. Launching the feature without a comprehensive ethical review and impact assessment, relying solely on engineering feasibility, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards potential privacy violations, algorithmic bias, and the risk of misuse, which could lead to reputational damage and potential legal repercussions under broader consumer protection and data privacy laws. Prioritizing user engagement metrics above all else, even when potential ethical concerns are flagged, is another critical failure. This demonstrates a short-sighted focus on immediate business objectives at the expense of user well-being and trust. Such a stance can lead to the deployment of features that, while initially popular, may have detrimental long-term societal effects or violate ethical norms regarding data handling and algorithmic fairness. Relying solely on user feedback after launch to identify ethical issues is reactive and insufficient. While user feedback is valuable, it should not be the primary mechanism for identifying and addressing fundamental ethical risks. This approach places an undue burden on users to uncover problems and fails to meet the company's responsibility to proactively safeguard user interests and adhere to ethical standards. It can lead to significant harm before issues are even reported, making remediation more difficult and damaging. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates ethical considerations from the outset of any project. This involves 1. Proactive risk identification, anticipating potential ethical and societal impacts before development. 2. Stakeholder consultation, engaging diverse perspectives, legal, ethics, privacy, user advocacy throughout the process. 3. Impact assessment, conducting thorough evaluations of potential harms and benefits. 4. Iterative review and mitigation, continuously assessing and addressing identified risks. 5. Transparency and accountability, being open about development processes and taking responsibility for outcomes. This structured approach ensures that innovation is guided by ethical principles and regulatory awareness, fostering trust and long-term sustainability.